I woke up that morning with the sun pouring through my window, thinking it was just another ordinary day. The city outside was alive, cars moving, people rushing to work, and life seemed to hum normally. But something felt off. A small knot of unease sat in my stomach, and I brushed it off as pre-work nerves. I went through my usual routine, coffee, laptop, a quick scroll through emails, but when I opened my work folder, everything changed. Files I'd been working on for months, meticulously prepared reports, all gone. My heart skipped. Maybe a server glitch? I whispered to myself. But when I opened the backup folder, it was empty too. Panic began to seep in. This wasn't an accident. Someone had targeted my work, my reputation, and me. Then my phone buzzed. It was Evan, my friend, my colleague, the person I trusted the most. "Hey, are you okay?" Something happened. I didn't respond immediately. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure whether I wanted to speak or just scream silently at the betrayal I hadn't yet identified. I spent the next hour combing through everything I could access: emails, server logs, project files. Tiny details started to appear. Files modified at odd times, strained for missions, emails that didn't match timestamps. It hit me. Someone had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. Someone who knew my habits, my routines, my weaknesses. Evan. He had been the only one with access at these precise times. The thought hit me like a punch in the chest. My mind raced. Could it really be him? My trusted friend? No, it can't be, I muttered. But deep down I knew. I spent the rest of the day silently observing, piecing together what had happened. Each clue pointed to one person. Evan. By the end of the day, I wasn't angry. Not yet. I wasn't panicking either. I was calculating, watching, waiting, because now I realized the war had begun. That night, sleep didn't come. My apartment felt different, silent, but heavy, like it was holding its breath. Every small noise, the hum of the fridge, the distant siren outside, the tapping of rain against a window, felt amplified. I couldn't stop thinking about Evan, about what he might have done, about the betrayal that seemed almost impossible to believe. I sat at my desk, coffee in hand, staring at the glow of my laptop screen. Every folder, every email, every timestamp. I started combing through them again, slower this time. There was a rhythm to my search, a pattern I was beginning to recognize. Files that were supposedly archived suddenly appeared modified in ways I didn't remember. Reports had been edited, numbers shifted. Small changes, almost invisible if you weren't paying attention. But I noticed. I always notice. And then I saw it. A string of emails Evan had sent months ago, buried deep in a folder labeled Project Notes. At first glance, nothing unusual. But when I read the words, a pattern emerged. He had questioned my judgment subtly, praised my mistakes, and positioned himself as a helpful observer. Every compliment he gave me had a shadow behind it, a hidden purpose. I leaned back, heart racing. This wasn't just about deleted files. It was strategic, calculated, deliberate. He hadn't just wanted me to fail. He had wanted to make sure everyone saw me fail, while he quietly covered his tracks. I reopened the server logs. Each login, each modification, each attempt to move files. It all pointed to him. The timing, the access points. Evan had been there, watching, waiting. I had been blind. My mind raced through every interaction over the past months. The casual advice he gave me, the late-night meetings he suggested, the encouragement he offered, all part of a pattern I had missed. And then the voice note. I found it hidden in a folder labeled Ideas. His voice, recorded months ago, casually mentioning deadlines, projects, and keeping things safe. I listened to it over and over, each time catching a subtle note I had missed before, a phrase that now seemed sinister. Safe, it's just about keeping myself safe. I froze. The betrayal wasn't just professional. It was personal. He had used me, trusted me, and now he had orchestrated my fall. I took a deep breath and stood up, pacing the apartment. Anger bubbled, but I forced it down. This wasn't about shouting or confrontation. This was about strategy, observation, precision. I knew what I had to do next. Collect undeniable proof, document every lie, every manipulation, every tiny crack in the foundation he had built around himself. The more I collected, the stronger my position would become. Hours passed. I cross-referenced emails, files, and voice notes. Each piece confirmed my suspicions. Evan hadn't made a single mistake, except underestimating me. He hadn't accounted for how meticulous, patient, and careful I could be. By the early hours of the morning, a plan began to form in my mind. A way to expose everything. Not through anger, not through confrontation, but through undeniable truth. I sat back, staring at the glow of the laptop, a quiet smile forming on my lips. Calm, focused, prepared. I realized something important. This wasn't just about retaliation. It was about reclaiming my life, about showing that even when everything seems lost, patience and strategy can turn the tables. I whispered to myself. He thought he was untouchable. He hasn't seen what's coming. And for the first time since the collapse, I felt a spark of clarity. Evan had underestimated me. He had assumed his careful planning had made him untouchable. But the truth, as I was about to prove, had a way of finding its mark, quietly and relentlessly. I saved all my findings into a separate folder labeled Truth. Each piece meticulously organized, time-stamped, impossible to dispute. Screenshots, emails, logs, voice notes, all there. The folder was my weapon, silent but powerful. I leaned back in my chair and looked out at the city. The lights of the streets glimmered like a battlefield I hadn't yet entered, waiting for the right moment to strike. And I knew it would come soon. The next morning, the city felt heavier. Even the sun seemed sharper, casting long shadows across the streets, as if warning me that something was about to happen. I could feel it in the air, the tension stretching like a wire ready to snap. Evan was already at the office when I arrived. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. He smiled, shook hands with colleagues, exchanged casual greetings, but I saw the cracks. The slight twitch of his hand, the shallow breath, the forced confidence that didn't reach his eyes. I didn't approach him. Not yet. I walked past, my steps deliberate, controlled. Every movement I made was a signal, unspoken, that I was aware, that I was ready. Back at my desk, I opened the Truth folder again. Every piece of evidence was there. Every inconsistency, every manipulated report, every false claim carefully documented. I studied it, memorized it, internalized it. This wasn't about emotion. It was about precision. I knew Evan was planning something. He had to be. Desperate people make mistakes, and he had been careless before. I just had to wait for the perfect moment. The first sign came in an email he accidentally sent to the wrong department. His usual careful phrasing slipped. Tiny inconsistencies, the kind only a meticulous observer would catch. I smiled quietly to myself. This was it. The first crack. Then came the whispered conversations. Colleagues talking quietly in corners, glancing at Evan, then at me. Subtle but telling. Everyone was sensing the tension. Everyone was waiting for the inevitable collapse. Evan sent a message to my phone. "Alex, can we talk? Privately. It's important." I stared at it for a long moment. Calm, measured. I knew this was his attempt to regain control, to manipulate the narrative, to intimidate me into silence. "Fine," I typed. "Give me a place and time." He responded immediately, specifying a small cafe 2 blocks away. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I had anticipated this. Every move he would make, every word he would speak, I had mapped it all out in my mind. Patience was my weapon, and he was about to make his first mistake. I spent the next few hours preparing, rereading the evidence, imagining every possible scenario. How he might try to charm, manipulate, plead. How he might try to intimidate or twist the truth. I planned responses, calculated pauses, even the tone of my voice for when the confrontation would finally come. By the time I arrived at the cafe, Evan was already seated. He tried to look casual, confident, but the tremor in his hands betrayed him. I noticed everything. The subtle way he avoided eye contact, the way he kept shifting in his chair, the faint lines of worry etched across his forehead. "Alex," he began, his voice carefully controlled. "I didn't think it would come to this. I just want to explain." I didn't respond immediately. I let the silence stretch, long enough for him to feel the weight of it. The predator, who had hunted me for weeks, was now waiting, unsure. "Explain." I finally said, voice calm, precise. "You've already done plenty of explaining to everyone but me." His confident facade cracked slightly. He realized that no charm, no words could undo the evidence I held. I didn't mean for it to go this far," he stammered. I leaned forward just slightly, calm, controlled. "Every action you took was deliberate, Evan. Every lie, every manipulation, every subtle sabotage. You thought you could control the story, but you underestimated me." He swallowed hard, his eyes flicking nervously to the door, the other patrons, then back at me. The panic was growing. The carefully constructed mask he wore for weeks was falling apart. "You don't understand," he whispered, almost himself. "I understand perfectly," I said softly, my voice even. "You thought you were untouchable, but I've seen every step you took, every misstep, every deception." Evan's hands clenched into fists, his jaw tightening. He realized he wasn't just exposed, he was trapped, and the more he tried to regain control, the more apparent his panic became. I allowed a faint smile, not cruel, but precise, to touch my lips. Calm, measured, observant. "You thought this was a game you could control," I said, "but it's not a game anymore. It's reality." He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. The man who had seemed so confident, so untouchable, was now a shadow of that persona. And I realized something critical. Victory isn't about force. It's about strategy, observation, precision, and the truth. The cafe felt smaller than usual, the walls closing in with the tension in the air. Evan's attempts to act casual were failing. His movements were jerky, eyes darting, hands trembling ever so slightly as he reached for his coffee cup. I noticed everything, every micro-expression, every subtle sign of panic. He hadn't realized I was observing so closely. I just want to clear things up," he said, voice barely above a whisper. I leaned back in my chair, calm, deliberate, let him stew in the silence. Sometimes the quiet speaks louder than words. "Clear things up?" I asked softly. "You mean the lies you fed everyone? Or the manipulation you hid behind smiles?" His hand twitched. His confidence was cracking. I could see it in his eyes. The man who had orchestrated my downfall was now vulnerable, exposed by the very system he had tried to manipulate. He took a shaky breath. "It's not what you think. I didn't mean for it to go that far." I smiled faintly, calm, measured. "Didn't mean to?" "Evan, every email, every alter report, every subtle sabotage. It was deliberate. You underestimated me. That's your mistake." His face paled. A bead of sweat formed at his temple. His eyes, once sharp and calculating, now flickered with uncertainty. You don't understand the pressure I was under," he stammered. I was trying to protect myself." "Protect yourself?" I repeated, slow, deliberate. "By destroying everything I worked for? By betraying someone who trusted you? You call that protection?" His hands tightened around the cup. He wanted to interrupt, to argue, but I let silence do its work. Each second stretched, amplifying the tension. I took a sip of my own coffee, slow, controlled, observing him like a chess master watching an opponent stumble into a trap. "You thought you had control," I said quietly, "but you were playing a game without knowing the rules. And I've been studying them since day one." Evan's eyes narrowed. He wanted to lash out, to intimidate, but words failed him. He was unraveling, piece by piece, under the weight of his own mistakes. Maybe we can fix this," he finally said, desperate, almost pleading. I shook my head. Calm, precise. "Fixing it isn't about excuses, Evan. It's about truth. And the truth doesn't need your permission to be seen." The cafe felt colder. Even the barista, unaware of the tension, moved with a slight caution, sensing the atmosphere. Evan's breathing grew shallow. His attempts to maintain composure were failing spectacularly. "You don't know what I'm capable of," he said, voice low, a hint of threat lacing his words. I leaned forward slightly. Calm, unflinching. "I've already seen what you're capable of, Evan, and I've accounted for every move, every manipulation, every lie. You're not untouchable. You never were." A silence fell over the table. The kind of silence that makes time slow, that makes your pulse echo in your ears. Evan's eyes darted to the exit, to the people around, to anything but me. Panic had replaced arrogance. Fear had replaced confidence. This isn't over," he finally muttered, almost to himself. I allowed a faint smile. Calm, measured, observant. "No, Evan," I said softly. "It's just beginning." The realization dawned on him slowly, like a shadow creeping over his mind. The predator had become the prey, and for the first time, he was aware of it. I gathered my things, stood up slowly, and walked out of the cafe. Not in anger, not in triumph. Calm, collected, prepared for the next step. Evan sat there, trembling slightly, realizing that the game he thought he controlled was now entirely out of his hands. The city outside the cafe was alive, oblivious to the storm that had just passed. Back at my apartment, I opened the truth folder again. Every file meticulously organized, every timestamp documented, every lie Evan had spun carefully recorded. This wasn't about anger, not about revenge. This was precision, observation, the perfect strike at the perfect moment. I poured myself a coffee, sat at the desk, and reviewed each email, each log, each voice note. Evan had made a critical error in underestimating me. The arrogance of believing he could manipulate, deceive, and remain untouchable, that was his weakness, and I intended to exploit it. I drafted a comprehensive report for management. Clear, factual, undeniable, not a word of emotion, not a hint of accusation. Just the facts. Evan's manipulations, inconsistencies, and attempts to discredit me. Then I paused. Timing mattered more than anything. I didn't want him to anticipate the strike. I didn't want him to prepare defenses. I wanted it to hit him like a revelation, sharp and irreversible. The next morning, I walked into the office with the folder on my laptop. I didn't announce my presence. I didn't raise my voice. I simply approached the senior management team, placed the folder on their table, and left. The reactions were immediate. Eyebrows raised, whispers exchanged, screens opened, evidence scanned, and all at once, the carefully crafted facade Evan had maintained for months began to crumble. I watched from a distance. Evan's face, usually confident and calculating, now pale and tense. His hands trembled slightly as he tried to explain, to justify, to deflect, but every word he spoke only exposed him further. Each attempt to regain control was futile. The truth had taken the stage, silent, undeniable, unstoppable. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. Management began questioning him. Colleagues whispering corners, exchanging knowing glances. Evan tried to control the narrative, but every move he made only highlighted his desperation. I leaned against a column, observing every twitch, every frown, every misstep. It was all part of the strategy. I had predicted this outcome, and it was unfolding exactly as planned. Then came the message from Evan. A simple text, almost pleading. "Alex, we need to talk. Please." I smiled faintly, calm, collected. The trap had been sprung. He was desperate, exposed, and completely predictable. "We will," I replied, but the stage is set. The day unfolded with tension thick in the air. Evan's attempts to regain credibility failed. Every question management asked highlighted another inconsistency. Every explanation he offered seemed weaker than the last. And everywhere I looked, people were starting to see the man behind the mask. By evening, Evan realized the magnitude of what he had lost. His control, his power, his credibility shattered. But I remained calm, because this was never about destruction. It was about justice, about letting the truth do the work. I walked back to my apartment that night, the city glowing under the evening lights. The weight of the past weeks lifted slightly, but I knew the next stage would come. Evan would react. He would panic, and I would be ready. patience, precision, and truth. They were stronger than any manipulation, any lie, any attempt to control. And Evan was learning that lesson the hard way. The next morning, I arrived at the office to a subtle shift in the air. Whispers, glances, hushed conversations. Everyone was sensing it. Tension clung to the walls like smoke, and in the center of it all sat Evan, trying to maintain his composure. But I could see through the act. Every twitch, every shallow breath, every flicker of panic betrayed him. He was unraveling, and he didn't even realize how much. By mid-morning, the first sign of his desperation appeared. A poorly worded email sent to the wrong department. He had tried to spin a narrative, to place blame elsewhere, but backfired instantly. Miscommunication spread like wildfire, and management began piecing together discrepancies that pointed squarely at him. I didn't intervene. I let him make his moves. Let him stumble. Let him panic. His own mistakes would do the damage faster than I ever could. Then, as predicted, he tried to reach me directly. A message popped up on my phone. "Alex, we need to talk. Alone. Now. It's urgent." I stared at it for a long moment. Calm. Controlled. I didn't type immediately. I let the message sit. Let him sweat. Let him feel the weight of his own fear. Finally, I replied, "Fine. Be there in 30. The cafe he chose was small, quiet, away from the eyes of others. He had thought he was clever, picking a place where he could manipulate the situation. But I had anticipated every detail. I arrived first, calm, precise. He was already seated, fidgeting slightly, eyes darting around. He tried to force a casual smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. The mask he had worn for weeks had cracked, and now the panic beneath was visible for the first time. "Alex," he began, voice tight, controlled, "we need to talk. Things are getting out of hand." I sat across from him, silent, letting the tension stretch. He shifted uncomfortably, realizing I wasn't going to give him an inch. "Out of hand?" I asked softly. "I thought you were the one pushing things out of hand." His jaw tightened. He leaned back, attempting to regain composure, but his hands trembled slightly. The man who had once controlled the room now seemed small, exposed, desperate. I can fix this," he said finally, almost pleading. "You don't want this war, Alex. Don't push it further." I shook my head calmly. "War? I didn't start it. You did. Every step, every lie, every betrayal." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I let the silence do its work. The predator he had been, the manipulator, was now trapped in his own panic. Finally, he leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You don't know what I'm capable of. Don't think you can outmaneuver me." I allowed a faint smile, calm and controlled. "I've already seen what you're capable of, Evan, and I prepared for it." His face paled. The arrogance he relied on for so long crumbled. His breathing grew shallow, his confidence evaporating. The realization hit him slowly. The game he thought he controlled was now entirely out of my hands. "This isn't over," he muttered, almost to himself. I stood, collected my things, and left the cafe. Not in anger, not in triumph. Calm, precise, ready. Outside, the city pulsed with life, oblivious of the battle that had just taken place in that small cafe. But I knew one thing. Evan's panic would only intensify, and the next move would come soon. And when it did, he wouldn't be ready. By mid-morning, the office had transformed into a battlefield of whispers and wary glances. The tension was palpable, almost suffocating, and Evan could feel it. Everyone around him seemed to sense his unraveling, his panic, his desperation. I observed from my desk, calm and precise, my fingers steepled as I watched the dominoes start to fall. Every colleague he had attempted to manipulate over the past months now eyed him with subtle suspicion. Every casual remark, every half-hearted smile, every forced nod, all of it was beginning to crumble under the weight of the truth. The first domino fell when a junior associate approached the management team with questions about discrepancies in project files. She didn't accuse anyone directly, but her inquiries highlighted mistakes Evan had tried to cover up. Management leaned in, scrutinizing the emails and logs that now clearly contradicted Evan's narrative. Evan's face flushed as he tried to interject. "It's a misunderstanding," he said quickly, glancing nervously at the team. "I can clarify." But every attempt to speak only drew more attention to his errors. Every explanation he offered contained contradictions, and each one was dissected in real time by colleagues who were slowly piecing the puzzle together. I leaned back in my chair, letting it unfold. My folder, the truth folder, wasn't even needed at this point. The evidence was being realized organically through the domino effect of his own missteps and panic. Evan's panic grew. He tried to regain control by calling an impromptu meeting with management, but the more he attempted to manipulate the narrative, the clearer his desperation became. Each word he spoke was weighed, questioned, and ultimately found lacking. His once commanding presence had been replaced by a shadow of anxiety and uncertainty. At one point, a senior manager asked him a simple question about a project timeline. Evan hesitated, stumbled, and muttered an unclear explanation. The manager raised an eyebrow, then glanced toward me, almost as if silently asking, "Can Alex clarify?" I remained still, letting Evan falter. His confidence evaporated further with every passing moment. He began pacing, muttering under his breath, trying to compose himself. But the office, once his domain, now felt like a cage, and everyone could see the cracks in his mask. I didn't intervene. I didn't need to. The truth was exposing him naturally. His panic had become public, and the carefully constructed illusion of control he had maintained for months was collapsing before my eyes. Evan's attempts to regain authority became increasingly desperate. He tried to charm, to manipulate, to redirect blame, but each tactic failed spectacularly. The more he spoke, the more the inconsistencies revealed themselves. And the more the team saw through deception, the smaller and weaker he became in their eyes. I realized then that patience, precision, and observation were more powerful than any confrontation. I had set the stage, and now Evan's own mistakes were performing the work I had meticulously prepared for. By the afternoon, the dominoes had fallen further. Management had begun formal inquiries. Colleagues were no longer subtly questioning. They were now openly scrutinizing him. The man who had thought he could orchestrate an entire downfall had become the center of scrutiny himself. Evan's messages to me were frantic now. "Alex, please, this isn't what you think. Don't push it further. We can fix this." I didn't reply. I let him stew in his own fear. The realization slowly dawned on him. He had underestimated me. He had assumed his careful manipulation had made him untouchable. But the domino effect of truth, patience, and calculated observation had already dismantled his control. By late afternoon, he was pale, sweaty, visibly shaking, and grasping at every remaining shred of composure. His panic was no longer hidden. It was performance for the entire office. And I watched quietly, a sense of calm satisfaction settling in. The first public phase of his exposure was complete. The next phase, however, would be even more decisive. The office was nearly empty as evening approached. Most of my colleagues had left, but the tension lingered like fog. I had requested a private meeting with Evan. Just the two of us. It was time. Not for anger, not for shouting, but for truth. I found him pacing in the small conference room, his back to the window. The city lights outside flickered like a silent witness to what was about to unfold. He didn't notice me enter. His focus was on imagining excuses, strategies, anything that could save him. "Evan," I said softly, letting my voice carry in the quiet room. He spun around, eyes wide. For the first time, I saw real fear. Not the shallow panic of public exposure, not the awkward tension of whispers. This was fear being truly understood, of being fully exposed. "Alex, I can explain." I raised a hand, calm and precise. "No, Evan, not yet. First, you need to understand the consequences of everything you've done." I set the laptop on the table, opened the truth folder, and began methodically presenting each piece of evidence. Manipulated emails, altered reports, timestamps, voice notes, every subtle betrayal. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I just let the facts speak. Evan's face drained the color as I walked him through the web he had spun. Each lie, each manipulation, Each act of betrayal reflected back at him. He tried to interrupt, to justify, to charm, but every word he spoke only confirmed the truth he couldn't escape. "You don't understand," he muttered, desperate. "I was protecting myself. I didn't mean for—" I leaned slightly closer, voice calm but firm. "You were protecting yourself at the cost of everything I built, everything I trusted you with. And now, the cost is yours to bear." For the first time, Evan realized the full magnitude of the situation. His carefully constructed mask had crumbled. His manipulation, his arrogance, his strategic plotting, all visible in cold, undeniable facts. And there was no way to reclaim it. I watched him shrink under the weight of his own miscalculations. The predator had become prey, and he knew it. I didn't think you'd find everything," he whispered, voice breaking. I allowed a faint, calm smile. "I didn't just find it, Evan. I anticipated it. Every move you made, I expected it, and I prepared for it." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken realization. He understood now that no charm, no excuse, no manipulative tactic could save him. The game was over. The truth had won. "What now?" he finally asked, almost pleading. I closed the laptop, standing tall, calm and control. "Now, you face the consequences. You learn that deception has limits, that trust is not infinite, and that truth eventually finds its way." Evan sat down heavily, defeated, speechless, finally grasping that everything he built on lies was collapsing around him. I didn't gloat. I didn't mock. Calm and measured, I left the room. He remained, a man fully exposed, forced to face the reality of his actions. Outside, the city was alive, unaware of the private battle that had just concluded. Inside, one man had lost everything, and one man had reclaimed it. Not through anger, but through patience, precision, and the undeniable power of truth. The days after everything happened felt strangely quiet. Not empty, just calm. The kind of calm that comes after a storm has burned itself out. The office no longer whispered when I walked in. People looked at me with a different kind of respect now. Not fear, not pity, but understanding. They had seen the truth unfold in real time. They had seen how someone tried to destroy another quietly, and how patience exposed everything. Evan was gone, not just from the project, but from the building. His name no longer appeared in emails. His chair was empty. His presence had faded like a shadow that only exists when there is light to hide behind. And I realized something important. He didn't just lose his position. He lost trust. And trust is the one thing you can't rebuild with words. I sat at my desk one evening, the city glowing outside the window, the same city that had watched me fall and then stand back up. For a long time, I had asked myself one question. Backhand index pointing right, why me? Why did he choose me? And now I finally understood. He chose me because I was focused. He chose me because I was quiet. He chose me because he thought silence meant weakness. But silence isn't weakness. Silence is observation. I had learned something deeper than revenge, deeper than victory. Small blue diamond that people who rush to hurt others usually do it because they're afraid of being seen. Small blue diamond that betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from people who want what you have but don't want to work for it. Small blue diamond. And that patience is the most dangerous weapon of all. I didn't celebrate Evan's fall. I didn't feel joy in his loss. What I felt was clarity. Clarity that I survived something that could have destroyed me. Clarity that I didn't become bitter. Clarity that I didn't turn into what tried to break me. I walked out of the office that night and felt the air on my face. Real, clean, honest. For the first time in weeks, I was free, and I understood the final truth. You don't win by becoming louder than your enemy. You win by becoming smarter than their lies. You don't destroy people with anger. You expose them with truth. And sometimes the most powerful revenge is not hurting someone back. It's becoming unbreakable. I didn't rush into revenge. I didn't shout. I didn't warn Evan. I watched him. Because when someone thinks they're winning, they stop hiding. And Evan, he thought he had already destroyed me. Every morning he walked in like a king, smiling, confident, acting like the office belonged to him. He spoke louder than before, took credit faster than before, And for the first time, he stopped looking over his shoulder. That's when I knew. Backhand index pointing right, the trap was ready. I started small. I stopped reacting. No anger. No arguments. No emotions. Just calm. That kind of calm that makes people uncomfortable. Evan noticed it. "You're quiet these days," he said one afternoon, leaning on my desk. "Gave up?" I looked up at him slowly and smiled. "Something like that," I said. He laughed and walked away. But what he didn't know, that smile wasn't surrender. It was timing. Because while Evan was busy enjoying the spotlight, I was collecting proof. Emails, messages, voice notes, project edits. Every small lie, every stolen idea, every move he thought no one saw. Late at night, when the office was empty, I stayed. Not to work harder, but to work smarter. I opened files he thought were erased. Checked logs he thought were hidden. Connected dots he never believed I could see. And slowly, a picture formed. Not of a mistake, not a misunderstanding, but of a pattern. Evan wasn't just betraying me. He was playing everyone. Management, clients, the whole team. And I realized something powerful. If I exposed in the right way, he wouldn't fall alone. He would collapse. But timing mattered. So I waited. And every day Evan kept talking. Keep lying. Keep stealing. Keep feeling untouchable. And every day, my silence grew louder. Because the most dangerous thing in the room is the person everyone thinks is already defeated. And that person was me. I knew I couldn't expose Evan all at once. If I did, he'd deny everything, twist the story, play the victim. So I decided to start with something small, something harmless, something public. During the weekly team meeting, Evan stood up like always, confident, loud, in control. He began presenting his ideas. My ideas. He clicked through slides I had built late at night, spoke lines I had written, shared plans I had designed, and nobody questioned him. So when he finished, I raised my hand. Not angry, not loud, just calm. "Quick question," I said. The room turned to me. Evan smiled like he always did. "Sure, Alex. Go ahead." I stood up slowly. "On slide 7, I said, you mentioned the client feedback from last Friday." "Yes," he replied. "That's what shaped the new direction." I nodded. "Interesting," I said, "because the client sent that feedback to me, not you." Silence. The kind that feels heavy. Evan laughed nervously. "Yeah, well, you forwarded it to me." I didn't argue. I clicked my laptop, and the screen behind him changed. An email appeared, time-stamped, addressed only to me, with my name at the top. Gasps moved through the room. I looked at Evan. "I didn't forward it," I said softly. "And that's not even the part that matters." He swallowed. I continued. "The part that matters is that this presentation was built on files from my system, files that only I had access to." The manager leaned forward. Evan's smile faded. "I just collaborated." Evan said, "We work as a team, right?" I nodded again. "Yes," I said, "we do." Then I sat down. I didn't attack him. I didn't accuse him. I just planted doubt. And doubt is dangerous. After the meeting, people started looking at Evan differently. Not like a leader, like a question. And Evan? He felt it. That evening he came to my desk. "You trying to make me look bad?" he asked quietly. I looked up at him. "No," I said, "I'm just making sure the truth doesn't get lost." He stared at me. For the first time, he wasn't smiling, because now he knew something. I wasn't done. And this was only the first move. After that meeting, something changed in the air. Not loud, not obvious, but heavy. People didn't laugh as easily around Evan anymore. They didn't nod the same way. They didn't trust his words without thinking twice. And Evan felt it. He started talking faster, explaining more than needed, trying too hard to look in control. That's how you know someone is scared. They stop being natural. One afternoon, I walked into the break room and found 2 co-workers whispering. They went quiet when they saw me. "Alex," one of them said slowly, "were you really the one who built the client strategy?" I looked at them. "Yes," I said. "I was." They exchanged a look. "I knew it," the other one said. "He always talks like he owns everything." Word was spreading, not because I pushed it, but because truth has weight. Evan started staying late, not to work, but to watch. He checked who I spoke to, who I emailed, who I met. One night, as I was packing up, he stood in my way. "You're playing a game," he said. I kept my voice calm. "No," I said. "I'm just doing my job." He leaned closer. "Careful," he whispered. "People who try to expose others usually get exposed themselves." I looked him straight in the eyes. "Only if they're lying," I replied. He stepped back. For the first time, Evan didn't have a comeback. That night, I opened my laptop at home, and I organized everything. Every email, every file, every message, every edit. Not messy, not emotional. Clean, clear, undeniable. Because I wasn't just planning to defend myself anymore. I was preparing to end the story. And Evan? He was running out of space to hide. By now, Evan and I were no longer pretending. The smiles were gone. The jokes were gone. Only tension remained. Every time I walked into a room, I felt his eyes on me. Not angry, not loud, careful. That's how fear looks when it wears confidence. One morning, the manager called for a private review meeting. Just him, just me. No Evan. That alone told me everything. He leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. "Alex," he said, "there's a lot of confusion around this project." I nodded. "I know," I said, "and I'm ready to clear it." I opened my laptop. One by one, I showed him everything. Original drafts, timestamps, email chains, revision history, not emotion, just truth. He didn't interrupt, didn't offend Evan, didn't accuse me. He just watched. When I finished, he took a deep breath. "This changes things," he said quietly. I closed my laptop. "I never wanted to destroy anyone," I said. "I just wanted what was mine to stop being taken." He nodded slowly. "I understand." When I walked out of that office, my hands were shaking, not from fear, from relief. Because now someone powerful knew the truth. And Evan, he still didn't. Not yet. That afternoon, he cornered me near the elevator. "You went to the boss," he said. I didn't deny it. "I told the truth," I replied. His jaw tightened. "You think you're winning?" he asked. I looked at him calmly. "No," I said. "I think the truth is..." The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside, and as they closed, I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Not arrogance, not pride, panic, because Evan finally understood. The story was no longer in his control. After that elevator moment, I knew something had shifted. Evan wasn't hunting anymore. He was hiding. He stopped walking loud, stopped showing off, stopped pretending he owned the room. Now he just watched. And when someone who used to attack starts watching instead, it means they're scared of what you know. The next few days felt slow. Too slow. The kind of slow that tells you something big is coming. I didn't rush him. Didn't poke him. Didn't challenge him. I let him sit in his fear. Because fear makes people sloppy. One evening, while everyone else left, I stayed back again. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to see what Evan did when he thought no one was watching. And that's when I saw it. He logged into a system he wasn't allowed to touch. He started deleting files. Not random ones. My files. The last proof he could erase. I didn't stop him. I recorded everything. The screen. The access logs. The timestamps. His username. Every move he made to cover his tracks became another nail in his story. The next morning, I sent one simple email to management. "I think you should review the system logs from last night." Nothing more. Nothing dramatic. Just truth. Delivered calmly. By afternoon, Evan was called into a closed-door meeting. This time, he didn't walk out. Hours passed. People whispered. Phones buzzed, doors stayed shut, and I sat at my desk, heart steady, not because I hated him, but because I had done everything right, not with anger, not with revenge, but with patience. And now, the end was no longer in my hands. It was in the truths. By the time the doors finally opened, everyone knew, not because someone announced it, not because someone shouted, but because silence tells the truth louder than noise ever can. Evan walked out first. Not fast, not confident, slow. His shoulders were lower than I had ever seen them. His eyes didn't look up. His hands were tight at his sides, like he was trying to hold himself together. The manager followed. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. "Alex," he said, calling my name. The room went quiet. "You were right," he continued. "Everything." I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just nodded, because when truth finally wins, there's no need for pride. Evan didn't say a word to me. Not goodbye. Not sorry. He just walked past. And for the first time since all this started, he was small, not powerful, not dangerous, just exposed. Later that evening, I sat alone at my desk. The office lights were dim. The city outside was glowing again. The same city that had once watched me feel invisible, now watched me feel free. And I realized something deep. Revenge isn't about hurting someone back. It's about not letting them turn you into who they are. Evan tried to take my work, my voice, my future, but he couldn't take my values. And in the end, that's what saved me. I stood up, picked up my bag, and walked out, not as a victim, not as a fighter, but as someone who learned the hardest lesson of all. Backhand index pointing right, the truth doesn't need shouting. Backhand index pointing right, it doesn't need speed. Backhand index pointing right, it doesn't need anger. It only needs time and courage. If someone ever betrays you in silence, don't rush to destroy them. Let the truth do it for you. Because when the truth finally stands up, everything else sits down. And that's how I lost everything in one day and gained myself back forever. Fire, end of story. Thanks for watching.